Ever since the announcement that IOI were making a James Bond game, I've been beyond excited. The Hitman games have been a favourite of mine since I first loaded up Hitman 2 on my Pentium 4 PC all those years ago, spending hours coming up with different ways to assassinate Don Giuseppe, or just roaming the streets of St. Petersburg looking for the perfect vantage point while trying to avoid all the patrols. Hitman has always had this air of espionage about it. Infiltration, disguises, double agents, gadgets, and even secret agencies trying to take over the world. It feels like a James Bond game already. So it's fair to say that IOI have had plenty of experience and they've got all the tools to make the perfect James Bond game. But I do have a few concerns. Hitman has never been good with action. As long as you stay silent and you pull off your hit flawlessly, it is perfect. But as soon as you get caught and have to get hostile, it might as well be game over. Gunplay has never been IOI's strong point, and I know that's kind of the point of the Hitman games, but sometimes after just spending hours in a sandbox trying to pull off the perfect crime, you just want to blow off some steam with a good old-fashioned shootout. And James Bond is also known for his action. Big explosions, daring escapes from villains' lairs, waves of henchmen, and of course, car chases. Which is my next concern. IOI has never made a car game or any driving mechanics at all, and car chases are pivotal to James Bond. Cars in general are a huge part of a series, so this is something that they've got to really nail down. Which brings me to the recent gameplay reveal, and after watching it, I've got to say, I'm hyped. I'm still as hyped. I'm even more hyped than I was before. I want to play this game yesterday. It's not perfect, but nothing ever is. What matters is that it gets so much right. It's exactly what I imagined when it was announced. All the things that makes Hitman great, with James Bond just sprinkled over the top. So let's get into it. The gameplay begins with Bond driving in a car with two other agents, and it looks gorgeous. Kind of gives me the vibes of Sapienza or Mendoza from the World of Assassination series. One thing IOI really does well, and they've done well for years, is their locations. Not to mention that this Jaguar wouldn't look out of place in a James Bond movie. Bond is still a rookie here, and he's a bit upset that he's been relegated to backup for this mission. And whilst he's waiting at his post, he spots a white-haired bellhop that's giving off some lethal weapon vibes, doing something very suspicious. So naturally he goes to investigate, and in typical Bond fashion, he goes against his orders and follows up on a hunch, which is classic James Bond. This is where we get into some actual gameplay, and it's very clear that this is the Glacier Engine, which isn't a bad thing at all. I'm glad they didn't make the move to Unreal Engine 5 and they've stuck with an engine that runs well. If it's not broke, then don't fix it. The entire setup is very World of Assassination. IOI has always built fantastic levels that feel like living, breathing areas that react well to the player's actions. The way the NPCs act and how the environment is set up would not look out of place for Agent 47. There's the use of distractions to get to restricted areas, and I'm guessing there's even multiple ways to tackle each obstacle and reach each objective. This is all stuff IOI already excels at. One thing I did like here was the bluff mechanic, where James uses his charm when he gets caught to get out of situations. Like this one here, when he climbs through an open window and startles the staff, he does a very James Bond-esque line to convince them that he's meant to be there.
What? Ken Banks, penetration tester. I need to have a stern word with your manager.
Good to have you on the team.
We also get a glimpse at some of the gadgets that are going to be available. At the bottom of the screen, we can see there's a shockwave camera, smoke pods, a dart phone, and a hack watch. These are the sort of things that are going to set James Bond apart from Agent 47, and hopefully they're going to provide a lot of fun and interesting methods to infiltration and combat. We see what I think is the dart phone being used here, and it seems to work a lot like the poison darts in Hitman, so I'm hoping that there's going to be more variety to the gadgets as you progress through the game. Once inside the building, the real espionage begins, and where does James go for his information? Why, the bartender, of course. It also appears here that there's a bunch of other ways to get the information. We have what looks like the instinct mode from Hitman, which points out important opportunities. So the sandbox design is in full play here, and I'll definitely be doing multiple playthroughs of each level, which can only be a good thing for the game. And just as it starts to get interesting, the video cuts to a different section of the game. It goes straight to the aftermath of everything that was about to just happen. which blue-balled me. I was fully invested in the mystery of the white-haired bellhop, and I wanted to know exactly what it was James Bond was doing at this event. I really just wanted to be able to grab the controller, walk around and investigate everything. But instead, we cut to a clearly roughed up Bond after a big action sequence inside the building. He's chasing after a car that speeds off into the distance. He hotwires a car whilst a random woman joins him, and the two of them have this classic James Bond moment.
Looking for these?
Hold on.
And they speed off. This is where we get to see the driving, and I've got to say, I'm not really that impressed. I mean, it looks like driving, it looks serviceable. There's some cool set pieces, like when they drive through the market and across the fields, but it just looked kind of clunky. I don't know how to explain it, but I get the feeling from watching the game that it's not really that smooth. Maybe it's this vehicle or this chase, or maybe you just need to get your hands on the controller for it to feel a bit better, but it just kind of felt a bit, I don't know, I couldn't really explain how or why it didn't look like it felt that great. It's also just on a long European road, so it kind of feels like it's on the rails. I mean, hopefully there's a couple of other car chase sequences where maybe there's like an escape and it can be a bit more like Jason Bourne, but I don't know really what to say. It just felt a bit undercooked compared to everything else that was shown. Then we got to take a look at the action, and this looked pretty good. It didn't look completely fluid, and obviously there was a few jitters, but it looked like it was a lot of fun, and it looked like there was lots of cool stuff that you could do. There was lots of these little nuances that I loved. I loved that there was lots of things that could go boom. Obviously, it's James Bond. I want plenty of explosions. The gunplay and the action, it kind of looked very Uncharted, which isn't a bad thing. I love the Uncharted games. I loved some of the dynamic fluidity to the action. For example, when Bond crashes into this guy and he falls off the ledge to the ground, it looks like it was straight out of a Bond movie. I also loved that Bond throws his guns at other enemies when he runs out of ammo, and you can transition to melee. This jump over the car was very nice. It seems like there's going to be lots of environmental attacks that you can do, which is something I love in games. It'll have me coming back again and again trying to pull off cooler and cooler looking things. Also, the set piece where you're transitioning from the ground to the plane was very, very cool. It was very Uncharted. Then when it gets on the plane, we have perhaps the coolest part of the gameplay reveal. Bond hacks the plane, and he can control the plane in real time, tilting it from left to right as you make your way to the cockpit, which means you can throw things around in the plane and set yourself up as an advantage as you make your way across to the next part of the level. And just as he gets to the cockpit, he falls out of the plane without a parachute, meaning that he has to acquire a parachute in midair with this fantastic set piece movement. And we're left on a cliffhanger as Bond grabs the guy and pulls the parachute, and we get the classic Bond barrel of a gun, which again blue-balled me because I wanted him to grab that parachute and just get that classic James Bond theme, that ba-da 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 ba-ba-ba, as you see Bond gliding off to safety. Other than the constant blue balls, what we got was thrilling from start to finish. They didn't give too much away, but they gave me enough to sort of wet my beak and to see that they really are doing James Bond justice. I was nervous at first with this being a young James Bond, but it looks like IOI really understands the material, and they have taken everything they've learned from making the Hitman games and molded it into the James Bond universe brilliantly. What I saw of the story was very encouraging. We got a lot of that classic Bond charm in the dialogue and the interactions between Bond and the other characters. And like I mentioned before, that bluff mechanic really fits in with 007. We've even got glimpses of Bond and a femme fatale romance with a French agent, two rival agents with different missions that end up working together, kind of like Tomorrow Never Dies. I also like how they left 009's status ambiguous. It looked at the start like maybe he was on your side, but then during the car chase, you are actually pursuing 009. And I was like, why? Like, I thought we were supporting him, but instead he's driving off, or maybe he's in the trunk, or maybe he's done like a Sean Bean. And if he has done a Sean Bean, please cast Sean Bean as the actor that plays 009. IOI do have the connections. They have worked with Sean Bean before, and that would be a fantastic casting decision. I'm really hoping for a lot more of these Bond cliches and callbacks throughout the game when it's released. The setting itself as well could not have been more James Bond if it tried, and the music was just magnifique. I really wish they would have just shown a lot more. But if they shown it all, what would I have to play in 6 months when the game actually comes out? After the playthrough, we also got a deep dive into the mechanics and the gameplay, and it is all very, very promising. First, we looked at the infiltration, which looks exactly like Hitman, investigating and looking for different ways to try and achieve whatever goal it is that you've got. They shown Bond bluffing his way into the next level by pretending to be a journalist, and then he had to go get himself a camera. I liked that there was actually multiple cameras in play here, showing that there is actually endless possibilities woven into each level. Something that IOI is, they're the masters at this, so they have my complete trust on this part of the gameplay. Then we got to look at some of the options available in a restricted area, showing you the multiple ways you can approach these two. Going loud and aggressive is definitely an option, which is cool. I love this bit here where Bond locked a guy in a room by sabotaging a door. We also saw some cool use of the gadgets like the watch laser, the smoke rods and the darts, again giving us the player lots of creative freedom when it comes to tackling enemies. Then we got a cheeky look at the melee combat, which did look a bit clunky, but overall it had a nice flow to it. I already said this, but I absolutely love the environmental attacks. The final thing that they shown was the gunplay. Whilst there was some good stuff, like obviously explosive options, and I liked when Bond shot this guy's arm and he dropped his gun, the narrator did say that we borrowed the guns from the guards, which to me sounds a lot like Star Wars Outlaws, where you have your designated weapon, which in this case is Bond's Q pistol, and any guns that you pick up will get thrown away after use, which is something I'm not a fan of at all. I do like to be able to choose and keep an inventory of weapons so I can use whatever I want when I want. So that is definitely a bit of a disappointment for me. But my overall thoughts on this, if you haven't figured it out by now, are very positive. I'm extremely excited to get my hands on it. Like I said, I love Hitman. I have hundreds of hours in the games. I've played and enjoyed every one since Hitman 2 Silent Assassin on PC. I even defended Absolution. I just loved the series and gameplay so much. I'm also a massive James Bond fan. I've seen every movie. I used to tape them on VHS whenever they were on the TV. When I was 8 years old, I got a copy of Tomorrow Never Dies, and I watched it sometimes twice a day until I could get my hands on more movies. I played all the games, and it's been a long time since we got a good James Bond game. Once Activision made them into Call of Duty clones, I honestly thought we'd never get a decent game. The last good one we got was Everything or Nothing all the way back on PlayStation 2, or maybe even From Russia with Love. I think that came out after or before that. I enjoyed that game too. The point is, it's been too long since we had a good James Bond game, and this looks to be well worth the wait. They got so much right, and I was worried it would feel basically just like Hitman with hair. But the look, the feel, the story, and the dialogue that they've shown so far looks to be perfectly in tune with James Bond. And they saved the best bit until last. The deluxe edition is free. If you pre-order at 60 quid, you get the deluxe edition for free, which is mint, because I just paid 80 quid to play Metal Gear Solid Delta early, and an extra tenner for Mafia the Old Country, and I now regret both of these decisions. I could have had an extra 20 quid in my pocket, but I'm an idiot. I should have just got the regular versions. Anyway, that is it for me and my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about the reveal. Are you going to buy this game? There's still plenty of time between now and then, so I'm sure there's going to be lots more news, and I'll be giving my thoughts on that too. This is a new kind of video for this channel, so give me your feedback. If you made it this far, consider liking and hyping up this video. Consider subscribing to the channel, and if this does well, as I said, I might do more of these like this where I just talk about games. Thanks for watching anyway, and have a great day.